Hey, what I wanted to do in this video is really an ode to one of the most versatile scales in all of rock guitar, which is the minor pentatonic. What I really want to try to do is bring out how versatile it is, how many different guitarists have made essential use of it, and give you some ideas for how to both copy other guitarists' use of it and ways in which you can try to modify it for your own purposes to get your own distinctive sound out of it. So I want to go through a number of different songs that are based around the same key and the same minor pentatonic scale. So we'll do some stuff around the E minor pentatonic, and then we'll do some stuff around the G minor pentatonic. So go through some examples first, and then I'll back up and do some theory and explain a little bit about what's going on and why it works and why it's so versatile, and try to draw some conclusions from it and point out along the way things that you can do to embellish and make use of it, as I said, to kind of make it your own. So what I want to start with is just talking about the E minor pentatonic. And let's start by just looking at some songs that are based off of a riff off of the E minor pentatonic. And then we can start looking at some solos that are done, but let's just look at some songs themselves that are built right around the riff itself. So for the E minor pentatonic, we're going to have the 1, E, our flat 3, the G. So E is our 1, the flat 3, the G. Then we're going to have A, which is our 4, our B, which is our 5, then D, which is our flat 7, and then our octave. And then starting again, of course, just E, G, A, B, D, E. And then use this G as well. All right, so let's look at some different songs that are built around, again, just the riff off of an E minor pentatonic. All right, so here's one song that's been covered by lots of people. One way in which people play it is like this. So just a little bit more slowly. Smokestack lightning. Now the way that the Howlin' Wolf version and his guitars play, it's same notes, just finding a different place up higher up on the neck. Give it just a slightly different feel. Goes a little bit like this. So there's one example. All right, so here's another one that was covered by lots of people over the years. So the Who did that one, Shakin' All Over, famously done on their Live at Leeds. I think it was originally done by a group named, what was their name? It was Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. In their version, they do a little bit, they do the opening lick up here again, but then they slide it up and they play around up, basically up a little bit higher. All right. See what else we can find. And here's another very famous, recognizable riff. Again, just going to use the same notes. Now we're going to work on a B, D, slide it up to the E, and then just do a little power chord with the E and the B. The way the song starts, it actually hangs for, I think, 2 measures on this E power chord before it gets further in to just 1. So it goes like this. Now for this next one, just want to recognize the different places where you can play that E minor pentatonic. So we got E here, G, A, B, D, E. And then we've got an A here again. Here's our B, and here's our G. All right? So with that in mind, so another way to go just with the basic notes of the E minor pentatonic. And while we're doing a little Hendrix, here's another one. Plain old Voodoo Child, not the one with slight return we did before. Now this one uses the E minor pentatonic. Really, the whole song is based off, just riffs off of that. Though the guitar is tuned down a whole step, but so it will sound higher than what's actually on the record. But the basic riff that the song's based off of is something like. Finally, another example, just a little spoonful from Cream. So the point is, just with that basic minor pentatonic, we've already got this whole range of songs built around nothing but just licks off of that. Now let's turn and see how people actually make use of the minor pentatonic scale in their actual soloing. And that'll help us understand a little bit more of how versatile this is and what different guitarists have done to put their own stamp on this pretty basic scale. Well, the idea is really, when you think about it, it's 5 notes. Now, of course, you got different octave that it's played at in different positions on the neck, but that's 5 notes, and that those 5 notes can generate so much original music is really something. It tells you something both about the versatility of the scale, but also what these guitarists are able to do with it. So you try to use it as an inspiration when you recognize that with some creative playing and some thinking about the things that you can do and all the spaces that come with the pentatonic scale, there's room for you to come up with your own sound. All right, so let's look at some ways in which they get used in the solos. Now, one of the ways in which guitarists have made use of this pretty simple scale is to add a bunch of bends to it and make that their distinctive mark of their soloing. So let me go through 2 examples. Now remember, with the E minor pentatonic, it's the same notes as are found in the G major pentatonic. So you can slide it up and make use of the 15th up to the 17th fret to give yourself some more room. Alright, so let me do part of that solo. Not necessarily note for note, but enough to make it recognizable. See how the bends are being used. Now we just took a look at Rolling Stones, Keith Richards. Now another famous master of bending of strings is David Gilmour. And let's take a look at part of a solo from a song called Childhood's End on the album Obscured by Clouds. Alright, for a change of pace, let's look at some songs in G minor pentatonic. So same pattern, but let's look at some of the different things that are done. We talked about bending as a way of making the scale your own. Here's some other ways in which people do it. Alright, so here's a little solo from maybe a song you recognize. Now, part of what's going on there, two things. It's Santana from Evil Ways, just a rough approximation. Two things going on there. So we got our G, and here's our flat 3, which is the B flat. But what he's doing is part of his distinctive sound is he adds the 2, so we get our G A and then our B flat. And then the other thing he does is he adds the E. And then he continues that E, he gets it up here as well. So that E in the G scale, if it were a G major scale, it would be the 6. So he's really adding the 6 in the G scale. And that's something that I think is really it's a hidden gem. A lot of people just don't pay attention to the role of the 6. Again, in the key of G, E is the 6. Let's look at another song that makes use of the E in the G minor pentatonic, just to show you how else it shows up. All right, so let's return briefly to David Gilmour from Shine On You Crazy Diamond. Now the song starts off, again, it's in a G minor pentatonic. The first note is going to be a heavy bend. If we're up here starting at the 15th, first note starts off with a heavy bend on the 18th. So we're just working off the G minor pentatonic, and then later he moves up, he moves down, and again just uses So some basic licks off the G minor pentatonic. But then there's this, one of my favorite chords of all time. He does this little picking. And just look at the notes that's in there. We got our B flat, which is the flat 3 of the G minor pentatonic, and then we've got that's our F, that's our flat 7th. So we're working right in that scale. And then we hit our G. And then what's the last note? It's that E, the one we were just talking about. Let's see my hands. And then that little riff finishes off with this little power chord from the F up to the G. But using the 6 is a way to add to that basic that basic scale of the minor pentatonic. All right, let's look at some other ways in which people embellish it, ways in which they make it their own. Now, if you notice, one of the things that we've been doing basically through every song we've looked at and every little lick, we've been focusing on high strings and the bends and the things you can do with those. But there's no reason not to focus on the low strings as well. ZZ Top is a good example. So the song Cheap Sunglasses works on the low notes. Now you can play it up with the G up here, but just for consistency's sake, we'll just fool around with it down low, down at the 3rd fret. Working on some double stops instead of just single notes, and again we see that E showing up as well. Now another song, again, G minor pentatonic. It's Albert King's Personal Manager. People may have heard that Clapton, when he did his solo for Strange Brew, it's said he used Albert King's solo note for note. But if you really listen to Strange Brew alongside of Albert King's Personal Manager, there may be a lot of notes in common, but they've got very different approaches. Albert King is maybe the master of the deep bends that inspired so much of the stuff we've already covered. One thing that's worth noticing is how you can slow down the pace in the way in which he does. It doesn't have to be blistering, especially when you're working with just a few notes. Make each note count. Now, one of the things that Albert King does that Clapton was inspired by and kind of modified was this kind of lick. It's very common in the blues. So we got our G minor pentatonic. Now there's this lick that's very common. Take the 3rd fret, and then either add here it's our fourth, which means this, our B flat, that's our flat third again. Now one of the things that Clapton is distinctive for is instead of using that lick, where he goes from the 4 down to the flat 3, he'll use the major third. So this is our G, the major third instead of the flattened third. Instead of, he'll do some, Clapton will do something like this. Again, instead of, or instead of. Alright, so there's some variety that you can think about using. And more generally, something that's important to keep in mind that people often will do, just to change it up, instead of staying in one simple scale, a minor pentatonic the whole time, is switch it up. Use the major interchangeably. So throw some licks in with the major pentatonic alongside or right in the midst of doing some licks with the minor. Just to get some variety. Jimmy Page is someone that was very fond of doing that, mixing up the major and the minor in the midst of his soloing. Right? Another idea. Use the flattened 5. This is our 1, this is our 5. Use the flat 5. In fact, if you use the flat 5, which in this case is going to be C sharp, and there's another place where we get the C sharp here, you've got what's known as basically the blues, the pentatonic blues scale. So that's something else that guitarists use to add to the sound of the minor pentatonic, just to give it some extra flavor, to do something additional with it. So think about using the flat 5, and various people are very fond of that. As I said, it's a staple of blues playing. Now to go back to Albert King. When we've been doing our bends, we've been essentially bending, hitting the string and bending up. Well, one thing that Albert King does, and that's something to keep in mind, is bend down. Start with the note already bent, hit it, and then release. Or do it both directions, up and down. Or just start with it already bent. So there's a bunch of stuff on the versatility and how common the minor pentatonic is